It's on behalf of a number of organisations. It's Wellington Teeth Trust, also Palmerston North Māori Reserve Trust and Hikoikoi Management Limited. Now, I've got a number of names, but I'll just invite anyone who's in the room who is on behalf of the organisations to come forward to the statement. And because I do have a number of names, maybe if you introduce yourselves and then we can take away. But thank you for being with us this morning. We've got 10 minutes on the clock, so I'll hand over to you to begin your presentation.
Kia ora, James. We'll just ask Tikiranga to open with karakia for us, please.
Kia ora tātou, e karakia tātou. Whakataka hau ki te uru, whakataka hau ki te tonga. Kia maki niki niki, kia mātaratara ki tai, e hia kena te atakura, he tio, he hoka, he hauhu, tihei, Maori ora.
And James, on my right is Vicky Hollywell, who's the General Manager for Hikoikoi Management Limited. I'm Liz Mellish, and I'm the Chairman of Palmerston North Māori Reserve Trust in Te Raukura, the Whariwaka. And on my left is Tikiranga, who works for us. On screen, of course, is the Chairman of Wellington Teeth Trust, Anaru Smiler, based in Taipo. And we're very happy to be here. I must say, some issues with traffic this morning coming in from the Wairarapa, but hey, you know, we made it in time. So firstly, I want to say, James, that we oppose the bill very clearly. And in fact, we find the need for us to discuss this somewhat offensive even. This bill does not do anything it purports to do, and instead has been a catalyst, as earlier people have said, division, racism and hatred since its inception. In the short space between the first reading to today, our communities are already seeing the effects of this harmful legislation. This is not beneficial to our country, our history or our perception on the world stage. Frankly, this is a national embarrassment. And just to add to that, I came from a meeting with the Aboriginal Ambassador Justin Muhammad, and certainly our cousins in Moimoia are astonished that we're even having this discussion. They hold Aotearoa New Zealand and Māori as you know, rock stars in the racism space, and this has been quite surprising and shocking for them. Anyway, moving on. We are the mana whenua and hold mana whakahaere in the takiwara Wellington, Lower and Upper Hutt cities. We represent the descendants of the original owners of the whenua in the transaction with the New Zealand company, who had the idea of how New Zealand should be colonised, who arrived here in 1839 and who we did a deal with, the transaction really being a trade agreement. And our iwi were the first peoples of Aotearoa to deal with the New Zealand company. And whilst we hoped that would give protection and enable us to trade worldwide, didn't quite work out like that, as we all know. And it didn't work out because the protection we thought with our powerful ally did not happen through the taking of our land, 209,000 acres in Wellington and the Lower Hutt, most of it taken as demesne lands or lands that were considered not used. And so we were alienated from our land. That happened pretty smartly. Currently, our ahi whenua trusts operate under laws that are restrictive, including the Tūturu Whenua Māori Land Act, the Māori Reserve Land Act, and every other, the Trustees Act, and so on. Despite the difficulties, however, of working through those situations, we've had to become more resilient. So we are. Despite this, our trusts have continued to be successful in various aspects, including economically, socially, culturally, and environmentally. We are strong contributors to the community in which we live, and our responsibility to the environment or the people within is paramount and is deeply rooted in Te Ao Māori, and our concept of kaitiakitanga manaakitanga, stewardship of people in the land. This message is reinforced by the ohaki, or the dying wish of one of our rangatira who did the deal with the New Zealand company, Te Wari. He signed the treaty in 1840 on the 29th of April in the harbour on a boat called the Ariel. On his deathbed in 1842, he said, "I muri nei kia pai ki aku tonga Māori, tonga Pākehā, kia tai aki te haruru o te reo, kia hau I te rienga." Meaning, after I have gone, be good to my Māori people and my European people. Let the thunder of your voice reach me in the spirit land. These are the words that still guide us today. In all that we do, it is vitally important that we live and breathe the final wish of our tūpuna. And can I say, I welcome you on our land, which was Honiana Tupuni's cultivation, on which this building sits. Thank you. And I'd hand to Anaru to add to this.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a final point we'd like to make too is, as was stated in our submission, you can see that the laws that have been imposed on us over the last 180 years really is proof that there is no real thing as Māori privilege. And in fact, as you read through that, you can see that these laws have worked to undermine Māori and destroy our communities over many generations. However, we have and are managing to overcome these challenges, but it does come at enormous cost. So our fear really is that this still conceived bill seeks to overturn decades of jurisprudence, which has in fact been designed to try and support progress, and will lead to enormous cost burdens in future legal proceedings that will seek to sort out whatever mess is created through such ill-conceived legislation. And we really have to ask the question, for what purpose? Progress is not going to stop. And the Hikoi certainly showed and represented generations of progress in overcoming adversity. So we'd just like to finish there to allow a bit of time for questions.
Good, Andrew. Thank you, Liz. There's some water there as well if you'd like.
Oh, thank you.
I'll open up for questions. We've got time for a few questions from members. Before I do that, I'll just leave the committee for Hana Rafferty, Maipi Clark to participate, and any other Te Pāti Māori members, just because they don't have a standing member of this subcommittee. Any objection to that? No, there's not. Thank you. Any questions, members, for the team? We'll go Hana Rafferty first.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā rā koutou. I'm Hihana ki tō koutou kōrero i te atanei. I just want to touch on you saying, Anaru, that there's no such thing as Māori privilege, and I think I've heard this all throughout the whole submissions, that there's something as, that there's Māori privileges and that we've got all these privileges. I'm yet to see what that actually is. But I'd love for you to extend more on that, that quote that you've just said, and kind of maybe the misconceptions and stereotypes that we see or hear as Māori.
Sure. Well, I'll give you a simple example in the land context. If you look at a lot of this legislation, it was designed for resources to be redistributed across the community. And I don't know if you remember the old Griffins ad back in the day where the world was getting gold and diamonds and jewels and New Zealand ended up with pineapple lumps. And so what this legislation and policies of the past ended up creating was that Māori being left with land resources that was landlocked, very expensive and difficult to develop. And so it was the pineapple lumps in amongst the jewels of New Zealand's land resources. And they came at a cost because all of that good prime land, etc., where Māori communities had thrived for generations, was ripped away from them and they were left with these pineapple lumps. And there's been an enormous struggle over generations to try and do something with it. And so, you know, despite having the toughest land, we also received no support and help in trying to actually develop the land, which was the hardest and most costly to develop to support communities. That to me is not privilege. So what the jurisprudence and stuff that has been occurring through the interpretation of the treaty principles more recently is to be able to support and help the development and address that imbalance. So, you know, that's really been what the focus of what the treaty principles have been designed to try and do. And it's to actually try and help progress for an underprivileged community, not a privileged one.
Thank you, Hana Rafferty. Thank you for your question. Thank you, Liz, Vicky, Te Karanga. Thank you for your time this morning and for being before the committee. We do appreciate your time.
All right, so what did we think of this submission?
Yeah, I mean, that is Mana Whenua speaking right there, specifically for the place where the parliament sits, and also for a little bit wider up there into Taranaki as well. But I mean, there is a lot of mana occurring in that conversation, and I think that was pretty impressive. And they were very clear that they didn't like what they were hearing, and that they were offended by even the fact that the bill had been put in front of the parliament. And I think that was there were some senior Māori figures there that were saying, you know, that it's not right what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, these were the people, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, who are watching. These are the people that David Seymour failed to consult. People like who we're seeing speak right now in this particular video. People that are the heads of trusts, people that are the heads of iwi, people that are the heads of hapu, right? David Seymour could have easily have picked up the phone and given them a yell. He didn't.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
They're easy to contact.
yeah.
They live down the road from me.
Yeah. And I think they dealt incredibly effectively with that concept that's been thrown around by people like Winston Peters and others around this whole concept that there's Māori privilege out there, and that there are certain members of the community that are at the top of the queue, and that's, you know, clearly not the case. And I think Anaru Smiler dealt with that very effectively through his example around the acquisition and management of land, which is a clear example that almost all Māori will understand if you have any interaction with ownership and management of Māori land. I think he dealt with that very, very effectively. And I found it very interesting that our regular questioner and friend Todd Stevenson was very quiet during that presentation. I was expecting him.
I think the room would have exploded if he asked what special rights do you think Māori have. I mean, look at this kuia here. She looks like she's about to pop off.
I mean,
it's like Todd
Stevenson has been. He had two questions for the previous
Yeah.
But this time very quiet, and I think he was probably well advised to zip it, sweetie, as in to borrow a phrase from a former politician on that one. Yeah.
But I think this submission really highlights why it's important to talk to people like this kuia, right? She has knowledge that the average Joe doesn't have access to. She knows about the history. She knows about the treaty breaches that impacted their hapu. I mean, I live near the Waitangi region, right? I live in the Taurua district. I don't know the history that she's just talked about. I don't know that, okay? And I'm pretty familiar with the history regarding Māori in my town, with Niriaha, right? But I don't know her history. So it's important to reach out and consult these groups, because there are things that you're overlooking when you're writing a treaty principles bill that's going to impact everyone. And she's just brought up, well, what about this point? What about the New Zealand company? What about this history? I didn't know any of that. I'm learning this for the first time.
I mean, there was a powerful example that Liz Mellish used when she referenced Te Wharepuri, who was one of the chiefs that signed Te Tiriti here in Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington. And we've just had a really amazing example where we changed the street name here up in Berempore to change it to Te Wharepuri to bring it back to the proper name. But I mean, Liz Mellish demonstrated that Māori and Pākehā's histories are intertwined together because of that very, very powerful example that she gave. And that goes right the way back to 1840, that the tupuna are saying that our histories are intertwined together. So it's not a competition of interests. It's collaboration together. That's clearly what's being asked for. So I thought that was a really, really interesting example.
Yeah, I mean, I've been learning about the Scottish Highlanders, and I'm seeing a lot of similarities with what happened with the ancestors of Scotland versus what happened to our tupuna. And it's, we're talking about Scottish people here, white people, right? They were screwed over too. We can look at the Irish. They were screwed over as well. We can go back to the English when the Romans came into town. They were screwed over too. It's like, there's a lot of overlaps here. It's not just unique to Māori. This has happened everywhere around the world, and it's important that we are aware of the history of political injustices that have occurred, injustices from the Crown.
No, you're right. I mean, you need to understand your history, otherwise you'll be doomed to repeat it. You know? So that's why.
I was walking to a hole that you can't come out of. All right. So now we're going to go into the next submission, which is Mana Wahine of Whangarei.
We don't quite have Mana Wahine with us, so we're going to go to a submission from Dame Anne Sandland.
Thanks for watching. Make sure you're subscribed to our Facebook